Hey everyone, and welcome back. In this video, I'm talking about knowledge versus true belief. And so we're going to look at the difference between knowing something and just believing something that happens to be true. So here's a question. We said truth was a necessary condition for knowledge. Let's ask about belief. Is belief necessary for knowledge? Another way to phrase that is, can you know something without believing it? Can you know that, for example, it's going to rain tomorrow? Or can you know that Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States of America without believing that it's going to rain tomorrow or that Lincoln was the 16th president? It looks like the answer there is no. And in fact, most, not all, I can think of exactly one exception, but most philosophers believe that belief is a necessary condition for knowledge. If you know that the earth is round, that means you think the earth is round. You believe the earth is round. So you believe that the earth is round. It would be crazy to say, I know that the earth is round, but I believe that the earth is flat. That would be a ridiculous, crazy thing to say. It wouldn't make sense. Why would it not make sense? Because knowing something means that you believe it. You think that it's true. You can't know something without thinking it's true. And thinking it's true is just another way to say believing. So if you know something, then you must believe it. So it looks like you can't know something without believing it. You got to think it's right in order to know it. So if you don't believe something, then you don't know it. And that means belief is a necessary condition for knowledge. You have to meet the condition of believing that it's going to rain tomorrow in order to meet the condition of knowing that it's going to rain tomorrow. Believing it's going to rain tomorrow is a necessary condition for knowing it's going to rain tomorrow. So truth and belief are now two necessary conditions for knowledge. We have two necessary conditions so far, truth and belief. So we might ask whether or not they're sufficient. Is having a true belief sufficient for having knowledge? Does having a true belief suffice for having knowledge? If you believe it's going to rain tomorrow, and then it really does rain tomorrow, does that automatically mean that you knew it was going to rain? Right. Looks like the answer is going to be no, right? You might not have believed it for any good reason. You might have just lucked out. Right? So we all have beliefs. I believe the earth is round. Some conspiracy theorists believe the earth is flat. Difference of belief. I believe one way, they believe another way. If the earth really is round, and it is, then my belief that the earth is round is true. It's a true belief. Ordinarily, we don't just say that we have a true belief that the earth is round. We say that we know the earth is round. We have knowledge that the earth is round. So consider belief in God, right? People often say things, not everyone, but there are people who say things like, no one knows whether or not there's a God, but personally I believe there is, or personally I believe there isn't. Look, technically we're all agnostic because no one knows for sure one way or the other, but personally I don't believe in God. Or no one knows for sure one way or the other, but personally I believe that God exists, or whatever. People say that kind of thing sometimes. And whether or not you agree with that, whether or not you agree, I mean, first of all, whether or not you agree about the God existing, God not existing part, whether or not you agree that no one knows whether or not there's a God. You might think some people know there isn't. You might think some people know there is. Regardless, we should all be able to agree it's at least a reasonable and coherent thing to say. It's not absolute gibberish nonsense to think that no one knows whether or not there's a God. That's a coherent belief to have. That's a reasonable thing to think. It might be false, but it's not meaningless. It's not absolute nonsense, right? It's a reasonably coherent belief that someone might have. Whether or not you think it's true, we should all be able to agree it's at least a reasonable thing to say. But if knowledge is just true belief, then this is nonsense. This is an unreasonable thing to say. This is not a coherent belief to have. Because when saying no one knows whether or not there's a God, but I personally believe there is, or I personally believe there isn't, you are voicing a belief that you think is true. So you're saying that you have a true belief, regardless of whether the belief is actually true. You're saying that you have a belief that you think is true, and also saying that you don't have knowledge. When you say, no, I don't know whether or not there's a God, but I believe there is, or I believe there isn't. In that sentence, you are saying that you have what you think is a true belief, but that you don't have knowledge. And if knowledge and true belief are the same thing, then you have just said, I don't know whether or not there's a God, but I know there's a God. Or I don't know whether or not there's a God, but I know there's not a God. And that's a ridiculous, unreasonable thing to have said. Right? That is not a coherent thing. You can't know and not know. That's not enough. You can't both have knowledge and not have knowledge about that very same topic. If you know, then that's it. You know. If you don't know, that's it. You don't know. There's no way for you to know that God exists and not know whether or not God exists, or to know that God doesn't exist and at the same time not know whether or not God exists. Right? Either you know or you don't, and that's it. There's no way for both to be true. So if people say no one knows whether or not God exists, but I personally believe God does or God doesn't, if people say that and they're not talking nonsense, then knowledge has to be different from true belief. Because if knowledge and true belief were the same thing, then they would be talking nonsense. And so lots of people believe there's a God, lots of people believe there isn't. One of those groups must be right. Either God exists or God doesn't exist. Either there is such a thing as a God or there are no such things as gods. Those are the two choices. So one of those groups is right and thus has a true belief about whether or not there's a God. I'm not here to say which group is right, but one of them must be, because there are only two options. Either this entity exists or this entity doesn't exist. So whichever group is right, someone has a true belief about whether or not there's a God. And yet and we all agree with that. We all accept that. We all know that. And yet it's still coherent to know that, to believe that, and still think no one knows for sure. So that means knowledge must not be true belief. It must be possible to have a true belief without having knowledge, right? If we can say the things that we say, that many of us say, and not be talking nonsense, then knowledge must be stronger than true belief, right? True belief might be just from a lucky guess. You might not know. You might have just sort of gotten lucky and happened to guess right. Or maybe you believe for terrible reasons, but it turned out true anyway. If you believe that you're going to win the lottery because, I don't know, a psychic told you were going to win the lottery, or because you really, really wanted it badly and you, for some reason, believed that wanting it badly would make it more likely, then even if you win the lottery and your belief turns out to be true that you're going to win the lottery, you still didn't know it. You just believed it because you wanted it to be true and you hoped it'd be true, and so you came to believe it for the wrong reasons. That's a true belief. In that case, you believe you're going to win the lottery, and then you did. But it's not knowledge, because your reason for believing it was terrible. Either, a psychic told you based on nothing, or You came to the conclusion that what you really wanted to happen was more likely to happen, which is not true at all. That's not how the world works. So you can have true beliefs without having knowledge. You can have beliefs that by sheer dumb luck turn out to be true, but definitely didn't count as knowledge. Because knowledge is somehow stronger than a belief, even stronger than true belief. We can have a true belief and still not have knowledge. So, what is this added strength? What makes knowledge stronger than true belief? What makes knowledge more than true belief? Better, different than true belief? That is the question that we're going to talk about in the next video. What makes knowledge better than true belief? And as you can see from the screen, the answer we're going to look at is justification. So I'm going to stop this video here. I'll pick up in the next video and we'll talk about justified true belief as an answer to the question, what makes knowledge better and stronger than true belief? So if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.